Welcome back to the True Church of Jesus Christ with His Latter-day Saint. And in this episode, we're getting into more of God's philosophy, that there is absolutely nothing new under the sun with men trying to concoct new religions. The game of life can be very difficult to understand. The motive, the motif, is God real? See, there's a lot of things behind why men come up with different ideas and how they strayed away from the teachings of God. Well, it all started with man's spiritual fall. He used to exist with a bright nature, with God, in a spiritual realm. And the thing is, the ancients were taught how to get back into this spiritual realm. So that's what the mission of Jesus Christ is all about. Believing in Him, that He is the way back, see this way, to this spiritual kingdom while we're here on earth. That's the mission of Matthew chapter 6. So that's the principles of religion, is that men used to have a bright nature, just like the book 1 and 2 of Adam and Eve. And they fell out of a realm and formed into material bodies. And this happened because you could say a war in heaven. So there's reasons as to how this material creation formed. In the Colburn Bible, God caused a dragon, or this Satan, a second formation, as it says. This creation is a second cycle of formation of creation. And it's a cycle where death and these fallen angels craft the clay pots. Or like it says in the Quran, "O Adam, see now these fallen souls in the city of the 9 gates," like King Paranjana in that parable. See, the souls like us, when we say I is different from this soul. So this is Galatians 5 in understanding the religious principles, is that God, or I, am in the midst of all being. God is in the heart of all being. And in John 14, verse 21, if you follow the religious principles or follow the commandments, Jesus Christ gave us 2 commandments, so it's not too confusing. Love the Lord thy God, because this I is the only love that you have. Now the soul is different. The soul is made from this lower material realm, or this spiritual darkness. And this is how evil proclivities, evil nonsense, evil thinking, evil people. This is a realm of evil and should be considered a kind of like a superintendent. And God put these souls in this realm in order to achieve divinity. Everybody in this realm, see, this is where death comes from. It came from the second cycle of creation, and it acts like a wheel. And all it really does is it revolves one to their immortality. That's the only purpose for this creation, and that's for the people that believe in God. That's what's in the revealed scriptures. So man's goal is to return back to the realm of the Sabbath. So that's why in Exodus, you could say, when God came, see, after the fall of man and after the fall of this creation, right? The thing with Moses was that God actually came into this creation. That's why Moses, and that's why you could say the Old Testament carries a lot of weight behind it in this world. That's because the who I am, the God of gods that made all things, came into this material creation. And he also made, you could say, these crooked, dead branches. It explains that in the Kephilim. These beings, these fallen angels that got kicked out of the realm. So the city of the 9 gates had to form. And it says that this light that shines in the darkness, it flashed into the shadowy beings. And these shadowy beings are under a law of death. God put them in a cursed, death, misty darkness. But a light shined in this darkness, and and then these beings worked upon the light, you could say. So you could get that in the Apocrypha of John. when they seen this light being reflected into the shadows, they made it into a crooked figure of a perfect likeness that they seen. So what that means is men on the outside might look human. See, like Jesus Christ, right? He came in the image and likeness. But Jesus Christ, his inner, see, this is the teachings of esoteric knowledge, is the inner workings of man's soul, or the city of the nine gates. What goes on in man's minds? So in this second form of creation, what goes on behind the soul of man is actually Satan, the law, and these fallen dead branches are in a crooked pattern off of a perfect image that was seen in the beginning or after a fall. So Matthew chapter 6 in the religious principle is for man to work out of mortality and to achieve immortality, or to return back to God's kingdom while he's here on earth. And he has to overcome death, or the shadow of a soul within him. So God is in the heart and God is I. And that's why we practice the religious principles, is to overcome the shadow of death within us. And that's what is known as enlightenment. That's the experience. It's a mystical experience that lasts for a quick second. But this is what we're working towards, is to have God remove the shadow of death, or Satan, or the operations of our own soul nature. So whatever people experience in their brains is not the truth. That's what the Christ says, by not taking thought, by seeking me in prayer. Prayer is different than thinking. Prayer is what elevates us, because now we are focused on the invisible and we're focused on a center within ourselves. So in John chapter 4, Jesus Christ is to be worshipped in spirit and in truth. So very simply, we're given a soul, and that soul can form imaginings. But what it's taught in the scriptures is the imaginings of the minds of men are actually the operations of evil, or the law of death, or Satan. In John chapter 10, you could say it's the wolf. Now, as the dead branch in Romans chapter 11, we also have an I. And I get the opportunity to walk through the door to the great I am. And in the great I am's philosophy, the wolf is trying to steal our divinity, the covenants, or the belief or knowledge in higher realms. So in Matthew chapter 6, seek the kingdom of God. It's going to be difficult seeking that kingdom of God. So in the Book of Mormon, the first book, chapter 8, we'll go to verse 23. And it came to pass that there arose a mist of darkness. So the mist of darkness, you have to understand, is this five-headed serpent. It's Satan and his demi-forces operating as the mentality of our individual experience. So everyone is given a soul, and that soul forms pictures or imaginings. But these imaginings are the demi-forces. In the Pistis Sophia, see, the knowledge of Jesus Christ, he teaches about Zeus, Aphrodite, Hermes, Ares, and Kronos. You can get that in the book 5 of Pistis Sophia. And the whole actual book itself, he starts teaching about the dragon, so the law of death, and the fallen angels that operate as the mentalities of this fallen group soul, or the dead branches. So understand that darkness, right? This whole earth is you could say an umbrella. It has a firmament. And this activity holds the forces of nature. So darkness is the people and what they think about themselves. See, if they generate pictures of their own self, then all they're generating is this darkness. Or you could say this fallen state of the five-headed serpent. The five-headed serpent forms this nature, and it's known as a she. So she has an activity or operations. And this operation, you can see, confuses King Purangana, or the spirit souls that come from a higher realm, or they come from God's realm. So being reborn is being reborn away from one's own intelligence. That's what this woman represents. And this woman is a image reflection, kind of like how a movie theater. We could see a light from this projector. It shines on the movie screen and it forms an image. Well, that's kind of like what God, the unknown one, he supplies the life, or King Purangana. And these shadowy beings, or the, you could say, operations of this light, it has to shine on a movie screen. So it shines on these dark beings. And those dark beings form the operations of man's consciousness. But the movie projector, as you can see, is out of sight. So when we're in this movie theater, or we're in the city of the nine gates, we cannot see the original light, or the unknown one. All men have is the operations of the movie, of their own, you could say, imaginings. And the operations behind their own imaginings are these fallen beings, these demi-forces. Now, the patterns of mentality are easy to explain. So men can see forms of dual nature, male and female. In the Colburn Bible, basically these conditioned beings, or these mentalities, just have a dual nature. So that's why with God, all things are possible to me that might be impossible to you. Because God, remember, if we practice God is infinite. So the nature of the divine, or I am, is an infinite consciousness. See, an infinite consciousness is different than the five modiums, or operations of mentality. Mentality is different from the mind of God. And that's also more clues about being reborn. Is the operations to understand is very basic. So there's male and female behind the operations of mentality, or the soul nature. There's also polarity. So there's basically fat and skinny. We could see that as a polarity of this energy, this light being cast into this darkness that forms man's imagining. It's almost like the screen now. Satan and these demi-forces are like a screen that enable the image, or the soul, to experience itself. But this soul got contaminated. See, that's what the contamination means. Is that I am a pure spirit being, or I am Jesus Christ. You could say the one person. So that's another thing with this mentality, is it corresponds. It has rhythm, polarity, vibrations. These are all activities of the mentality that form images of different people, different places, different things, different colors, different sounds, different vibrations. It forms a material world. But with Christ, there's only one consciousness. As he says in Mark 12, there's only one consciousness, because I am the way, or I am the life. And that means there's a hidden, you could say, spiritual kingdom behind the operations of man's own mentality, or behind the operations of this visible world. There is another world, and that's what we're working towards. So not taking thought for the operations of mentality, even our own pictures, you see. It's basically simple. If we're sitting in the movie theater, or if we're paying attention to our own imaginings, all we have to do now is turn away from it. Oh, that could be very difficult now, because the movie could be very intriguing, enticing. You know, one soul experience could be performing, some millionaire having a whole lot of money, or having a whole lot of things. Or the reason why people deny themselves, see, this is also deny thyself and pick up the cross and follow me, is because sometimes that movie that people are watching, or their own mentalities or their own imaginings, it doesn't produce good effects. You know, some people by birth produce deformities. See, that's also understanding the operations behind this nature. It fell into corruption because it could produce diseased people right from birth. So people right from birth are given an opportunity to turn away from the pictures. Just like you would watch a movie, right? You could turn away from it. But what makes people watch the movie for the hour and 30 minutes is just attention. They're giving their attention to this. So God says to turn away from that and give your attention to me, but I'm invisible. So using the operations of your mentality, you could generate me by reading the scriptures or following the religious principles, or by worshiping the one person. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it's all about devoting yourself to Matthew chapter 6, the one person. And this one person guides us out of the realm of pictures that are formed by the operations of other beings that are operating behind the temporal laws. So the temporal gravity, the temporal formations. In the Bhagavad Gita, you could say that's illusion. How is it illusion? You could say the religion, Satan. He lured man away from the kingdom of God. So in the Kephilim, it says that this rib, remember when Satan or these rulers pulled a rib out from Adam? It's not a rib from our stomach. In the Kephilim, it says that's a firmament, or a firmament is another world. See how this world has an electromagnetic umbrella that everyone's attached to? Well, Satan took away a realm and formed a woman, Eve, or Mother Nature, this lower dark realm. When they took the rib, or they took a firmament away from this cosmic man, see, man, he is also the dead branch, but he also, as it explains, in what God's trying to teach, is he is encompassed by other beings. Or he is the representation of the cosmos, the microcosm and the macrocosm. The thing is, his bottom cosm is tied to hell. So that's where Satan lured or took away. Or you see this darkness, this death, it tries to hide the light realm. So out of the second creation, God also placed himself into it. And as it says, this cosmic man sprung up as an illuminous being. And that's when Satan tried to steal this light away from Adam by taking a rib from him. In the Apocryphian of John, it says that very clearly. They took this cosmic being, or Adam, down to the lower formations of hell and tried to make this city of the 9 gates, or, "O Adam, shall I show you another kingdom?" And that's exactly how this illusion formed. That's what you could say this mortal intelligence is, our own mortal intelligence. It could be viewed as, you could say, one giant movie projector. Everyone shares the mortal intelligence because they are mortal. And that's what we have to work out of. The collective. See, when man fell, or he got lured into another realm, he became trapped with shadowy beings that represent this nature. So after people die, "O Adam, shall I show you our abode?" And our abode is a fiery realm of hell. And that's how this second formation started. It started because of a fall and Satan trying to steal this light of God in the beginning. And that's when God hurled down the dragon, and it formed this second cycle of creation by the same institution. This light also entered into this shadowy cosmic being, or this lower formation of Adam. and they could not make their Adam rise. So God had to enter in, or as it says in the Quran, we gave him a covenant of a bright nature. And that's when Satan tried to hide this realm or this kingdom of God, but through death. Men have to follow the religious principles, and that's why the spirit or I overcomes death, because we contemplate good virtues. Simply death is just ill religion. That's what's not taught about the principles of religion. Men don't have to die. What they have to understand is the virtues. So if God is the one person and we're not projecting any other person, that's also what constitutes overcoming death as well. So while we're praying and we're thinking of the one person, we have to be patient. And this secret has been lost to man, because that shadow that formed this creation is just an envious shadow, or a shadow of jealousy. And this is what keeps men away from the kingdom, or keeps men away from higher knowledge, or keeps men away from immortality, is their own jealousy, their own envy. And that's what is operating behind their mentalities. It's not them. See, being reborn means I have nothing to do with evil. And we're trying to practice virtues in order to conquer death within us, or have God reveal itself within us. And all death or Satan really was a shadow of ill religion or other people's attitudes. You see this misty darkness? When men have, you could say, a really bad picture on their movie screen, it makes it very difficult to practice good virtues. See, people don't believe that the good can overcome evil and actually death in their own experience. If people contemplate fear and anger, they're contemplating death. And that's why men can't overcome death, because death came from a spiritual origin. This realm fell completely into material creation. And because of that, death rules, as you see, as a law, as they call it, the rulers of nature. Because man became mortal and he completely lost anything eternal. But God, the craftsman spirit, is within his heart. And the only way men can overcome this eternal death, because Satan was made first, or you could say this darkness has a weight of eternity. Death is eternal and man is not. He's just under the law of death. But if he falls into the hell, see, the path to hell is wide. That's because of many fake preachers out there not teaching these truths, that death can be overcome by worshiping the one person. But worshiping the one person means we've got to turn away from our own movie projectors, which is the imagination. That's where Satan works, or this darkness. He works by forming images in our mind. See, the rulers of nature do this, the five-headed serpent, and they form some woman, a mortal intelligence, and she doesn't know where she's from. This second fall of man is what's called a forgetfulness, or man fell, as it says, in a lost and fallen state. He's in a lost and fallen state because he has a dragon behind this five-headed serpent guiding his experience. This illusion of nature, or the illusion of Gaia. It's all not in his mind, it's in the mind of Satan, actually. Everyone is in this misty darkness, just like just like a big swimming pool. Man's goal is to overcome that, but how is he going to do it with all these bread of the Pharisees out there? The religious principles have been lost to man, and that's what the Bhagavad Gita explains to us as well, too. So in Canto 5, Chapter 6, we'll get right into that here. So King Parikshit said to Shukdev Goswami, "My dear Lord, for those who are completely pure in heart, knowledge is attained by the practice of prayer." So again, Matthew chapter 6. The only way we're going to obtain knowledge from higher worlds, or obtain God, or go through the door is by prayer. And prayer is just understanding what we're doing. So we could pray about the parables. So you know why Jesus Christ spoke in parables? Because people will not use their intelligence, so the operations behind their mind. They're not going to sit there and meditate on the Good Shepherd parable. He spoke to them in parables because meditation and prayer opens up the intelligence of God within us, or Emmanuel, God within us. That's why he spoke to them in parables, because through their operations of mundane nature, good passions and ignorance, the living entities under the spell of illusion will not be able to understand what the Christ says, because they have to be reborn out of the spell of death or out of the spell of their own birth. They have to just defeat the pictures within themselves, and it takes Galatians 5 verse 16. You have to practice the one person. I am the one person. So that's what it says in John 17. If you practice oneness with me, I am the way, the truth, and the life out of this death, or out of this third dimensional realm, just out of this movie screen. That's what this third dimension is. It's just a shadow of pictures that are not real. But to some people, it's very real. So if men aren't taught the way, it leads to just attachment for fruitive actions. So attachment to wife, family, just gaining money, or the material concepts of life. The biggest thing that has to be overcome is the material concept, because there's just so much people under this umbrella, this firmament, that don't know the way, or don't believe in God, don't believe in immortality, don't believe in anything at all. So there's a lot of mundane thinkers out there that are just tied to their bellies, attached to just playing video games. And this is the pollution that people have to go through, which is called nescience. So what that's darkness. You see, when people just, in a realm of forgetfulness, first off. So this is why prayer is important, because of a constant remembrance. If we remember God and remember his ways, that's when the way opens up. And that's what prayer really is. It's like being a professional athlete. If you can't train, then you won't be good and you won't be professional. And that's because of the weight of forgetfulness. There's 300 million people sitting around the world, just sitting around the world. And that's what creates forgetfulness. See, this generation of thought, feeling, and action, it's going to be difficult for the athletes to maintain their skills. That's why people have to practice that much harder, because they're in a realm of forgetfulness. And if you don't practice God for a few days or see the fall of man, it's the same thing. He fell into a realm of forgetfulness of God. And he always now has to keep practicing the way, or else he too will fall into this realm of forgetfulness or death. That's just a simple explanation of how men just entangled in fruitive actions are just in a realm of forgetfulness. Not even remembering God, not even knowing why they're here or why this realm is here. No questions about nothing. So that's why this realm is difficult to build skills and to maintain and keep skills, because of corruption or because of Persephone. See, one of the forces of nature, it fell into the realm of Hades or corruption. And now men's skills, their potency diminishes over time, but it diminishes out of a way in which he forgets things. See, that's you could say the mentality of this realm. Men forget this, men forget that. But the biggest thing is their relationship with God. And that's why prayer has to be completely practiced. Or you could say this life of contemplation. You could bring up the life in contemplation wherever you go. Even if you have this, that, and the other, you just have to remember where you are all the time. And that's the Vedic principles. For such people, the power of mystic prayer automatically arise. They do not cause distress. Why then did King Rishabdev neglect them? Srila Sukdev Goswami replied, "My dear king, you have spoken correctly. However, After capturing animals, a cunning hunter does not put faith in them, for they might run away. Similarly, those who are advanced in spiritual life do not put faith in the mind. Indeed, they always remain vigilant and watch the mind's actions. Yes, that movie projector. See, one on the path knows that God's within the heart, not within the movie projector or the operations of nature. The mind can be very misleading. Right at the back of the Quran, right at the back, there's like 3 lines. It says that Satan is always speaking to man in the shadows. See these operations of nature? Man's thinking is not his own. That's why prayer is important and developing his relationship with God. And that's why more advanced men do not put faith in their own souls. That's because they know their soul is from this lower realm, or this realm of hell and death. If they achieved enlightenment or God, now they know the truth, that God is in the heart, and whatever they see out here constitutes the nature effect or the nature illusion. That means putting more faith in the revealed scriptures, what's been revealed throughout all time. Text 3. All learned scholars have given their opinion. The mind by nature is very restless, and one should not make friends with it. That's very important too. When men are combating, see the Ephesians 6, putting on the armor of God. Now we're not making friends with the operations of nature, the 5-headed serpent, going through the 7 days a week. We're not putting faith in man whose breath is in his nostrils or in this world. The mind is by nature always restless, even though it's going through hell. People can have cancer, but the restlessness of the mind might make them want to have sex. And you see those two illogical things? When people are sick and destitute, what's the point of doing other actions or functions or operations in nature? That's why the mind has to be, you could say, stifled with prayer. That's why the virtues are underrated, like self-virtue. I mean, discipline, self-discipline. Especially chastity. Not getting involved in the sexual patterns of mentality floating around in the imaginings of one's mind. Do not make friends with that. Or else men will be too agitated and they will not receive higher knowledge or prayer or self-discipline. That's one of the things that should be taught a lot too, is to avoid, you could say, sexual interaction or needless sexual interaction. So if you're single and you're trying to achieve knowledge of higher realms, stay single. Do not have in your mind, see the mentality, all the imaginings of having some girl and just doing whatever the movie screen wants. See, do not make friends with the mind. Do not take thought for the operations anymore. Seek me. But if you're in a relationship that, if you're in a relationship, obviously, that needs conjugal visits, one has to practice discipline. Your wife or your husband isn't there just to plunder each other whenever you please. A new, you could say, attitude has to be cultivated, especially if people are in relationships already. So if they don't want the wine to spoil, you know how relationships get sour with people and people get bored of each other even after 10 or 15 years? That's because they've been indulging in sex too much. That movie screen of just sitting around, having a good time. Yeah, oh yes. Don't make friends with that, especially if you're married. Because you know what happens to the rest of the married people out here? They don't become married. We have a huge divorce rate. And that's just known as adultery and fornication after. It's going to make it much harder to practice the principles if you've just been screwing around with some girl you thought you were married to, and then 5 years later you end up divorced. Well, that's because of sex indulgence, not practicing any virtues with each other. A good virtue to have is basically you're farmers, and the fruits of sex are very sweet, a very sweet fruit. Now, just like anything in nature, it takes time to grow. Oh, but here's the big temptation. When the fruit first appears, right, when things get good in the relationships, Do you start eating off of it? That's where people jump into bed too early and screw things up. They don't realize that these virtues were put in place so men don't fall into misery with each other, men and women. And that's what they create, is a lot of misery just because of sex indulgence. They make too much good friends with the restless mind, and by nature is evil, and which produces evil. So if people don't wait for the ripening of the fruit in the relationships, they're just going to pick off an empty tree from each other. And that's what things get stale in relationships. People hate each other. They wake up and say, what the hell's going on with this place? And how do I have 2 kids with this thing? Oh, you don't want to be in those situations because you made friends with a restless mind that by nature is riddled with death and corruption. So if we place full confidence in the mind, it may cheat us at any moment. Even to greater beings than human beings, even Lord Shiva became agitated upon seeing Mohini, so another form of the Lord. And another mystic fell down from a mature stage of mystic perfection, all because of the agitation of the mind. The mind is by nature very hard to conquer. But meditation, the way, can be practiced in any situation, even if you have a marriage. You can see how marriage, if they don't practice the way, marriage just becomes an institution where people end up hating each other, got too much bills to pay, too much, see the kids after, meaningless, meaningless progeny, divorce rates, Ashley Madison's. And this is what we're not looking for. So if you're on the path, don't make friends with the mind, especially if you think you're lonely and you need somebody in your life. Oh, that's the biggest enemy to spiritual consciousness. St. Paul says just to keep it single. Don't look to mingle, because there's a world out there that has to be discovered before one ties himself down to error, ignorance, sin. See, if guys just keep getting divorced, they're just having sex with girls. And the idea that they need to get married to have sex with girls is the problem. You don't need to get married to have sex with girls. But on the path of God, we're not looking just to do these things. So that's one thing we give up in sacrifice. The mind by nature is looking just to fulfill stealing the honey jar from various loose women. Isn't that the prodigal son parable? God knows by the nature of the mind as a prostitute, looking for various lovers. And if the prostituting soul goes out there to try to find whatever X amount of lovers, and then on top of that gets the erroneous idea that it has to be married first in order to receive this, it's going to come up with very big mistakes. That's what a lot of people are getting themselves into, is just big mistakes. All because of the ill religion, the bread of the Pharisees. Nobody knows the way. And even if they're in a relationship, people don't know the way. Even for their own happiness. I didn't know the way. That's why I got crushed with a mystery Babylonian woman. The only way in conditioned consciousness is just paying bills. You see this periphery of mentality? It causes King Puranjana to get crushed. Because this soul by nature is from a lower realm looking to trap man under prostitution, just sex. So people out there that think they're married and whatever, make sure you're really married, because truth, not just the truth of God, but the truth of yourselves, when things go down, some marriages, they break. Not enough truthfulness, not enough companionship, not enough trust, not enough other things, and they've just been picking off the tree of sex. Just like that prostituting intelligence. The prostituting intelligence has to be controlled. That's one of the functions of, you could say, this lower nature, is to trap man in his lower nature. Just so he ends up being a fornicating dog. And it doesn't matter if he has a wife. If he has a wife, it just gives him more of an excuse for self-indulgence and divorce rates. In this day and age, marriage has lost its function between two people. What it is nowadays is just an phantasmagoria of basic sex. If people aren't getting that, the roof over their house is not good enough, and that's what ends up divorce. Or they go for someone else. In this day and age, it's just about people prostituting themselves to various honey jars. And man is just a lost and fallen Pooh Bear looking to stick his hand into whatever honey jar comes his way. Or King Perungina, same thing. But he doesn't know that the unknown one, the unknown one does not like ill religion in anybody's life. There's a law. If people don't think they're okay, if people don't think God automatically affects people off of error, let's put it this way. You see how this realm has a lot of stupid people in it? That's how God punishes people, because this people don't have intelligence. That's how God punishes this realm. It's already in a realm of thoughtless forgetfulness to begin with. And on top of that, the basic man is very unintelligent. That's how God punishes man. On top of that, he's already thinking he's a human being. And on top of that, he's not too smart. And on top of that, he does other things that aren't too bright anyways, that add on to his misery. Anxiety, depression, and just see how God punishes people. There's 70% of anxiety, mental depression out in the world right now. That's how the law operates, darkness, all the time, by a crippled, intelligent, or less intelligent populace. See, the law of death is always in man, and God punishes man with basically lack of intelligence. And that's what people are experiencing in this day and age, with all these mental defuncts, all these ADD, DBD. It's all nonsense. All concocted nonsense. And that's all because men get punished day by day by day because they're in a realm of forgetfulness and evil. And evil corrodes their intelligence. Day by... You know how people, you can see the people, they don't get smarter as time goes on. In fact, people get stupider as time goes on. How does that happen? God punishes this realm. Every second of the day, this realm, as it says in the scriptures, gets reduced with strength, intelligence, integrity, because of the age of darkness. That's how God punishes mankind. Day, second by second, is by his intelligence, which this realm doesn't have. See Donald Hump? He's crying about intelligent people because lesser intelligent people crashed planes with each other just about 2 weeks ago. Now he's crying about the intelligence of the people. You know why the intelligence of the people is not too bright these days? Well, that's because they gave it into their basic nature. Jerry Springer and Maury Povich, even in those higher echelon places like the military, you just got guys that could just do whatever. There's no standard. See, the country's standards. God punishes human beings with their lack of intelligence in the year 2025. People are stupider than they've ever been because of this realm of forgetfulness or not following the principles. That's what men are under. They're under a law of death. And death makes this realm unlivable. Almost unlivable because there's other living entities. There's just other people. You don't know what those other people are doing in this time and space. Or getting carried away by other activities. That's also what constitutes this lost and fallen state. So we'll go into another phrase here, text 4. An unchaste woman is very easily carried away, and it sometimes happens that her husband is violently killed by these people. If the devotee gives his mind to a chance and does not restrain it, his mind will give faculty to the enemies of lust, anger, and greed, and they will doubtlessly kill us. Oh yes, or lead us down to things that we don't want to do. All because of attractions. See what men put their attention or attraction to? It actually matters in life. The mind is the root cause of lust, anger, pride, and greed, lamentation, fear, and illusion. See the mind, the mental perceptions, it all just generates this horrible movie screen known as the material world. And that's what happened too with this lost and fallen state. He doesn't have anything good in his periphery. The mind is the root cause. That's why we have to lay the axe at the root. God is one consciousness. And since God is one consciousness, he will not generate lust, anger, pride, greed, lamentation, illusion, and fear. So the emptiness, the formless, and the void, it reduces all of these things. Now combined, these evils, these constitute the bondage of fruitive actions. And what is learned, these constitute fruitive actions, what men can benefit or put faith in their own minds. Lord Rishabdev was the head of all kings and emperors within his universe. But assuming the dress and language of an Avaduta, he acted as if a dull and materially bound person. So he basically dressed himself up as a mendicant. Just a priest that is a renouncer, you could say. And because of his intelligence, he acted dull and materially bound. Consequently, no one could observe his divine opulence. He adopted his behavior just to teach people how to give up the body. So just like the Christ, when he says, did you guys come here to see someone dressed in a fancy robe or a king? No, he dressed himself up as someone humble and taught how to give up the body, give up all and follow me. See, he taught the religious principles that are basically here. Nonetheless, he maintained his original position as an expansion of the Lord. So that's when you could say the dove, the baptism of the dove. Christ is not an expansion of the Lord. He is the Lord made flesh. But that's what our understanding is with God. Is that we are, you could say, remember that light that shines on the movie screen? Well, now we are that light. We're an expansion of this light, but this light on the movie screen has to come back into the projector. So it has to come out of the mentality and back into the heart. That's the mission. That's the easiest way to put it, is that this light shines in the mentalities of men, but the screen behind it is Satan, and Satan projects these images of the outer world. But men now have to use that force or that inner soul to come back home to the original light. So that's what it means by being an expansion of the Lord. Remembering always in that state that he gave up his pastimes as the Lord within the material world. So being a renouncer. This is what God teaches, giving up our activities in the world. But our activities now are based in reading about God, praying about God. This is what opens up the spiritual world and immortality within us. Actually, the Lord had no material body, but due to prayer, he considered his body material. And therefore, because he played like an ordinary human being, see, like the Christ, he came to his own. And people thought he was an ordinary human being, but he's not. Guys that know their true identity know that they're from the original light, an infinite consciousness. They're not ordinary human beings. So they have to give up the mentality. So that's what St. Paul says. Should I preach the gospel like you're a bunch of human beings? I think that's in like Corinthians maybe, somewhere around there. Shall I preach to you people like you're ordinary human beings? Well, yes, in this day and age you have to. That's how far fallen the consciousness has gone down under spiritual weight. He began to wander all over the world. And while traveling, he came to a province in South India and passed through these places. He had no plan to travel, but he arrived and entered into a forest. He placed stones within his mouth and began to wander through the forest naked and with hair disheveled like a madman. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's really hardcore in deny thyself and pick up the cross. These guys, after a certain age, had to leave their homes and pick up the cross and go live in the forest and have to practice the crucifixion. That's what giving up all and not engaging in the world means. You can do that philosophically by understanding that God does not engage in any affairs of the world. So, we'll go back into the scriptures here. While he was wandering about, a forest fire began, and this fire caused friction in the bamboos, which began to blow around in the fire, and the entire forest caught on fire, and the body of the Lord was burnt to ashes. So a lot of these guys in the Bhagavad Gita end up, you could say, giving up all and following me. Now, at a certain stage in life, that's very important, because this society just is a never-ending show of work. And at retirement, people think they can just sit around and do nothing. Well, at retirement, it's very important to measure out what you're going to do in your life. That's when men in ancient times picked up knowledge, or they picked up the cross, and they knew they were going to die anyways. So when you're 50, you have nothing to look forward to too much. If you pick up your cross and follow me, you can be revealed the spiritual kingdom. Men in their later ages did that more vigorously, or as God says, with more zeal. They practiced my kingdom. Shukdev Goswami continued, speaking to Maharaj Parikshit, "My dear king, the king of Kanka, Venkat, and Kutika, whose name was Anarhat." So this other person now, this is where false religions come in, heard the activities of this other priest. And by imitating these activities or principles, he introduced a new system of religion. So there's a lot of bread of the Pharisees out there that introduce new systems of religion that don't practice going back home to God, don't practice enlightenment. And these are all just imitated systems. And if they don't include the Supreme Lord, then they're just the philosophies of men usually. And men don't have in their philosophy even of overcoming death. So there's no point in listening to any other man after a certain point of time, once one has accumulated the proper knowledge. Like in a sense, in a theory, I don't have to listen to Joel Goldsmith anymore or Rudolf Steiner. But because I value them and view them as teachers, I always listen to them anyways. But they are two not human beings. They've discovered their true nature, and that's all they do is preach God. So it's not like I'm listening to two human beings. I'm listening to the one self, you could say, the one consciousness. So if people don't look at a spiritual teacher that's already attained the one consciousness, then their endeavors on listening to certain people, they're going to think that these people are human. And that's a big mistake. That's a very big mistake. And that's how these false religions come into play, because men aren't enlightened anyways. So Mr. Steiner, Mr. Joseph Benner, and Mr. Joel Goldsmith are enlightened people. And they should be considered God conscious. So when people listen to them, you are getting God conscious. You are not getting human beings. So by imitating these principles in a time where ill religion took place, these people took advantage of darkness, an age of sinful actions. And this king or this person gave up religious principles or seeking the kingdom of God, which is free of risk, and concocted a new system of religion opposed to the principles. That was the beginning of Jain Dharma. So this Bhagavad Gita really exposes a lot of things. The fact that the Buddha, so this is the first canto of Bhagavad Gita. The Supreme Lord incarnated as Buddha in order to fool the populace out of Vedic principles, which is worshiping the one person, or worshiping a divine person. You see, the Buddha, he just said he was a man. And by God's ordinances, he did this. It's like God fooled human beings out of godhood. So if the human beings believed in Buddha at that time and not the supreme person, well, see, that's again with this human being. We're not looking, as St. Paul says, to listen to other human beings anymore. We're above human beings. We're trying to look for the divine grace. And the world got fooled because first, the Buddha, he claimed he was just a man. And he didn't see the Vedic principles. He speculated about a hereafter. That's very important to understand. But then there's certain other, as it says in the Bhagavad Gita, like the true Buddha, from the, you could say, imagining of the cosmos, or the collective unconscious. There was a true enlightened individual that came down as well. So there's, you could say, two Buddhas. Both were instituted by the Supreme Lord. And if people don't know that, that's what this concocted religion is all about. Fake Buddhism or Jainism, the Jain principles. Jain principles came from imitating other people following religious practices. It's kind of like when people go to the gym and they see the meathead that's in really good shape and he's training hard and he knows what he's doing, right? But guys that don't know what they're doing, they just try to imitate his behavior, and they go to lift up their bicep curls, and it's an imitation, you see. They don't do it right, or they can't perform it correctly. They don't know the proper principles. They don't know righteousness. It's the same thing how religion is made, by imitations and concoctions of other people's imaginings. Just like when guys would go to the gym and imitate other people. They don't know themselves how to do these actions. They're just imitators. And that's very important with understanding also this principle of mentality, is that it has a conditioned consciousness, like the real Slim Shady. Imitators. Stereotypes. And that's why we don't put trust in the mind, because the mind already has this pattern condition of imitation in it to begin with. The Christ or God consciousness is uncontaminated or unconditioned. That's another thing too with God consciousness. In order to break the conditioning of our experience, we have to understand that God is unconditioned consciousness. As he says, pure. But what does pure mean? Being pure means you're not going to follow into stereotypes. Stereotypes of other, false ego. Yeah, we're not going to follow Eminem, a stereotype. That's what being pure means. Being pure-minded means there's only one person, and that one person is invisible by spirit, and he does not have a concocted mentality. God is unconditioned. See, when Jesus, son of Mary, came down here, he came down here to preach the gospel. He was not in a lost and fallen state like the Buddha. See, Jesus Christ was not seeking enlightenment. He was far from seeking enlightenment. He gave the gospel of enlightenment. He gave the gospel of defeating samsara or the devil. That's what the gospel, or when he came to administer the gospel. That means that Jesus, son of Mary, is God. He is who I am. And he's not in a lost and fallen state with mental concoctions. Conditioned nature. God is not trying to pretend to be somebody. That's another thing to actually understand when we're going through self-realization. Other people try to pretend to be. See, there's going to be false Jesuses, false this and false that. That's because they're using their mental concoctions to pretend to be someone. The Christ is unconditioned, not a pretender. When he came to preach the gospel, he says he's the truth because the truth emanates from the one consciousness. Jesus, son of Mary, did not mentally concoct any of the gospel. See, when he received the baptism of the dove, that was the Father, the Holy Spirit, in now Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ was speaking through here, the heart, or in parables where they will not understand. Jesus Christ was not born, you could say, conventionally. That's why we have to understand the Immaculate Conception. He's not born in the river of mentalities, going through conditioned nature. And that helps us greatly when we're trying to go through our lives. So when we're stuck in the movie projector of our mentalities, we actually can open up the secret place of the Most High. And there's an emptiness there. So there's no pictures. See, there's no conditioned consciousness in the void or in the secret place or in the 91st Psalm. There's no evil because the Sabbath, God removed evil, or you could say Satan, from the mentalities of our minds. But one has to open up this fourth dimensional mind, or the true mind as it's called in the Orient. That's more in the martial arts manuals. They know of the true mind because guys were suffering there. Guys were suffering with war. So when guys get hacked up and they can't see that movie Projector of Life when it wants to go back home to its wife and it's missing an arm and a leg. It can't perform those duties and the wife doesn't like her husband because he's missing an arm and a leg. Well, now he's forced to practice Buddhism. Why? Because of the amount of suffering that is in the projected thought. So until next time, take care.